So today I wanted to go ahead and make a quick video on my Mongoose Fat bike. Now this is a bike that has gotten tons of attention across the internet and across the world in regards to its quality. How trail ready is it? Can you be a serious bike rider and ride one of these fat bikes? Now in my personal experience, when you get it right out of the box, absolutely not. It is not a decent bike, it has a lot of bad components and it's poorly put together. However, if you're willing to put in some time, some effort, do some work, and add some new components to it, you can actually make it a pretty capable bike. So when I first unboxed this bike, it came in some broken down components. It had the fork attached to the frame, the rear tire was installed, the drivetrain was installed, but the handlebars were not installed, the front tires were not installed, and the pedals were not installed. So I went through the process of building this thing up. I actually took everything apart, cleaned it, re-greased it, and then I went through and I took her for her first test drive. Now, I gotta be honest with you, the first time I rode this thing, the very first thing I noticed was how awful it shifted, how terrible it felt. And the reason for that is this guy right here. Now this is probably the cheapest twist shifter I have ever utilized in my entire life. In fact, this is the exact same one that came on my daughter's $89 Walmart Mongoose. This thing is so imprecise, it stops in between gears. As you're riding, it'll just randomly run through the gears. It is terrible, and it's really going to make your life miserable while you're riding this bike. So to get rid of the terrible twist shifter, I actually went with a Shimano SL-M310 rapid fire shifter. And the nice thing is it's a 7-speed trigger shifter. It works actually significantly well. Took me maybe about an hour to install it front to back, get everything adjusted, and it was under $15. So really can't complain, works great, so much better than that twist shifter. You'll notice that I also ended up having to replace the grips. Now the original grips that they give you are only about 2 inches long because that grip shifter takes up the majority of the handlebar here. So what I went with is a GT DOHC. Nice grippy, they're just slip-ons but they actually work pretty well. And then I installed some new bar ends just to give me a little bit more protection on the end. So after I corrected all the shifting issues and getting this thing to where it actually moves okay, I had to focus my efforts on the brakes. Now, the brake levers that come with this bike are unbelievably cheap. In fact, they're the same ones that came on my daughter's $89 Walmart Mongoose. And I'll be honest with you, I could not get these things to stay still on the bars, no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried. And once I finally got them to stay still, the cables popped out of these little cheap fittings and actually I ended up with no brakes whatsoever. So you can see I've actually destroyed this one taking it off because I was so sick of it, and I've actually gone through and I've upgraded both the brake levers as well as the calipers. So I'll go ahead and show you that now. To help take care of the braking issues I had with those mechanical brakes, I went with a Shimano M315 hydraulic setup. Now the nice thing is these come as a pre-assembled kit with the hoses and calipers already attached and bled. Now I did have to cut down the hose for the rear brake by about 8 inches. However, they were really easy to get cut down, reinstalled, and bled out with absolutely no issue. In addition to the brake levers, you'll find that I've upgraded to a hydraulic caliper. They actually came in the kit with the levers and the hoses pre-attached. And I've upgraded my rotor to an SLX rotor. It's just a significantly nicer rotor, a lot less warpage, a lot less adjustments needed. This thing basically you bolt it on and it is ready to go, and it stops great. So the next two items that I found were also absolute garbage on this bike were the cranks, the sprocket, and the bottom bracket. Now the original bottom bracket is literally the super old school style. It's just got a little bearing inside and a race, and just thread it into the bottom bracket. You got a spindle that runs through the center. And these would allow so much dirt to get inside of them and to get all gritty, and they start making noise. It's unbelievable. Now, the crank arm and sprocket, the issue I've run into is the sprocket's actually starting to come loose on the crank arm. So although it's a 3-piece, the sprocket is part of the drive side crank arm. And what happened is it would kind of rattle around and it made a ton of noise. And ultimately I just got very scared that this thing was going to let go and I'd have no capability of pedaling the bike. What I did to resolve the bottom bracket issue is I actually went with a YST sealed bottom bracket. Now this is a significantly beefier bottom bracket race, but it's also got a seal here so that your spindle can't allow for dirt or water to get inside your bottom bracket and ultimately cause rust or just wear from the dirt getting inside. For the crank arms and sprocket, I actually went with a XCT Sun Tour. Now this came as a 3-piece sprocket, but I've basically just taken out first and third, leaving only the second gear. Now the nice thing about this is I actually reduced quite a bit of weight from those solid steel crank arms, and I've gone with a 32 tooth as compared to a 36 tooth from the original, which makes this bike significantly easier to pedal in 5th, 6th, and 7th gear. That 36 tooth made it almost impossible to use those gears. Something that I need to note when you're installing these crank arms is that the spindle that holds the two crank arms together across the center, it actually needs to be flipped end for end. And the reason for that is it's actually offset one way versus another, so it sticks out a little further. And when you flip it, it gives you a really nice chain line, and just because of the way that these crank arms are formed, they actually have perfect clearance on both sides. The next problem I ran into with this Mongoose Fat bike was the seat post and seat clamp. Now the seat post itself is this old school design. It's got the old dual pivot on top. It's a pretty heavy piece of steel, and it was just terribly hard to adjust, terribly hard to get the seat in the right place, and terribly hard to get it to stay still whenever you finally found that right place. Now the seat clamp itself is that old school welded, just kind of a piece of alloy that they tack weld to the top of your seat tube, and it's got this cheap plastic quick release on it. And the problem I had with this is it just didn't have enough clamping power to actually hold the seat post in place, so it was constantly lowering and lowering as I was riding. For the seat post, I went with an FMF Sport alloy seat tube, and it's a 28.6, which is the same size as the original diameter. But it's got the single bolt pivot as compared to the dual clamp pivot, so you can basically just bolt your seat into place and then just make the adjustments using the single bolt. Now for the clamp, I actually went with a Corky quick release. It's an alloy, it's lightweight, easy, cheap, and it's actually got a nice ridge on it so it sits on the top of the tube without having to worry about making too many adjustments. So what I can say is after the changes that I've made to this bike, I'm actually pretty impressed. I trail ride it all the time. I actually alternate between this and my other bike, and I can go anywhere that I can go on my other bike on this bike. It is pretty heavy, but that's okay. You know, it helps you work on your strength buildup. The frame itself is very strong. The fork itself seems pretty strong, and the wheels actually seem very strong. No concern whatsoever about bending or breaking any of those components. The tires themselves are very heavy. You got a lot of rotating weight. There's some benefit and some loss to that because they're a lot harder to climb with, but they actually get spinning fast, and if you're on a long flowy trail, they keep spinning for a long time. Now next steps for me with this bike, I think I'll probably end up changing the bars out just to get something that's a little bit wider and a little bit stronger. And then I'll end up changing these tires out once they wear a little bit, just for something a little bit lighter so I can bring that rotating weight down a bit. Overall, I think this bike, after these upgrades, is a pretty substantially decent bike. I'm under $450 invested, and it's hard to find a fat bike that even starts at that price. So if you're willing to put in the time and effort, you'll actually get a fair bike for a pretty inexpensive price that's capable of doing almost anything you're looking to do. Now, I do have to say, if you are a hardcore rider, if you're looking to put in serious mileage on a bike in the wintertime or even use it as your main trail bike, this is probably not the route to go. I don't think there's any amount of upgrades that you can do to make this that high of a quality bike. Overall though, I'm definitely happy.